All right, that was the background report there by our correspondent, Oyemi Ajayi. We have with us in the studio the former Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Bulus Lolo. Ambassador Lolo, we're glad to have you this morning, and we apologize for waking you up. You know that you're a retiree now, so
thank you very much. He deserves the rest and the sleep, you know. It is only NTA that can wake me from my sleep. So, well done, you and Jumai and the whole team on Good Morning Nigeria. You are doing a great job. You are keeping us well informed. Please keep the program going and go into greater depth always. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Ambassador Bulus, of course, let's begin by taking a look at the overall foreign policy ecosystem under which the Paris summit took place, and then the president participated. It is his first outing, as it were, and therefore first engagement as president of the Federal Republic. In your opinion, what do the optics indicate?
Well, let me borrow your term, Kingsley, when you said foreign policy ecosystem, which is for me a new expression, but an innovative one.
Thank you.
Because everybody today is talking about ecosystem. And unless we understand that there is a system to what we are doing, we will continue to make certain assumptions. And I like it that the president was in Paris to discuss this new initiative to come into agreement and fashion a new financing pact for the globe. We forget that the leading institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, were both established in 1944, at which time there were only 99 countries that were independent. Today, you have close to 200 countries that have gained independence, meaning the greater half of countries that are independent were not part of the Bretton Woods institutions at its inception. And therefore, if we are looking at what you started with by an ecosystem, what is the reality in our world today? You are dealing with gross poverty. You are dealing with the challenges of climate change. And for Africa, especially, our call is for voice and representation. Now, voice and representation means what? Where decisions are being made that affect you, you are a party to those decisions. And your representation is such that your interest is well protected. Because in what again you call the ecosystem, each country has its own interests. And in international dialogue in the past, we have had a principle that recognized our commonality, but then our differences. So we said in Rio in 1992 that we are common but different, in the sense that our endowment, our challenges, and our opportunities are not the same. For President Tinubu to have made it to Paris, I'm very happy. And indeed, those who have commended him have done what is proper. You commend what is right. That our leader of this country must be seen where things are happening. And that he stepped out to this important summit is an indication that Nigeria is willing to engage. Now, the type of engagement we bring is another thing, because from the various sideline meetings that the president had, we now know that it wasn't just about the summit. He met with business leaders, he met with other opinion molders, and groups that are key to our development and our needs today in the country. For me though, looking back in 2015, and because you are playing in Africa, I hope that the president will equally be able to participate in the forthcoming AU summit that will take place I hope and I believe this month. Because what you call optics should start at home. What are you projecting so that the outside world will see? Foreign policy, I've always said, is what? A projection of your domestic policy externally. And therefore, the president making a statement as he did in Paris in Africa is imperative. But he's only 1 month in office, so it's too early to say he hasn't done it yet. So,
yeah, it's still 1 month in office, but I believe it is, you know, it's a growing process. He will get used to it.
Right.
And at the meeting, we could see that foreign leaders were scampering to have a meeting with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I think there's a paradigm shift on, you know, how Nigeria is seen now. Now, how would that, you know, impact on the foreign policy here in Nigeria now?
I hope it will and should impact positively. That there is the desire to engage Nigeria. And it therefore behoves us as a country to also be willing to shake hands with outsiders. You use the word scampering. It has always been. There is no Nigerian leader that has come in newly that the world has not looked forward to engaging with him. And always with great expectation. But it is in the course of carrying out what you have promised to do that we begin to see a slippage. We see a retreat, almost going into a cocoon, because we do not manage ourselves well. But a well-administered, well-managed Nigeria, a Nigeria that is united, a Nigeria that cares for its vulnerable, is a Nigeria that will always attract people, high and low, big and small. And I say it, our endowment is such that we don't have to go begging. We really don't need to go borrowing. God has blessed us. What is lacking is our ability to manage our resources, our ability to take advantage of our opportunities, and our ability to know how to optimize those things that are of benefit to us.
In terms of timing, Ambassador Bulus, Lolo, what would you say regarding the fact that President Tinubu appeared to be riding on a wave of dramatic, if not drastic, changes to some domestic policy issues? Two of them in particular, the notorious fuel subsidy.
Yes.
And secondly, the multiple windows for foreign exchange transactions. And having, as it were, dealt with, shall we say, those monsters, the president seemed confident to approach some of the very important players on the global stage to say, this is who we are, this is what we have done, and going forward there will be many more things to do. Was that timing, therefore, almost perfect in your opinion?
Very perfect, I would say, because now that the president is still riding on a momentum, it is often the case that we, do not rush certain decisions. And because we do not rush those decisions, we lose the opportunity. Now, those who have studied Western democracies will tell you that the best time to take the most difficult decisions will be the first 6 months of an administration in office. Because at that time, the public is ready and willing to bear with you, to exercise patience, because they believe that, well, somehow, this is a guy that has just come in newly, he will deliver on his promises. But after 6 months, the view changes slightly, because they'll say you've spent more than 100 days in office. You are too slow. You remember the last administration. It took more than 5 months for the cabinet to be established. Now President Tinubu is required by law to announce a cabinet within 60 days. So you can see the change. And I'm really happy that the president was able to bite the bullet with courage and conviction when he removed the fuel subsidy. The growth in our fuel subsidy, if you do the analytics, you will discover that there is something fishy about it. And I tie this also with the issue of the multiple exchange rate that you talked about. In all my travels around the world, ours is the only country that I know where we auction foreign exchange. And you do so even with people coming to crowd on the limited resources that you have. In others, you can go to the bank, do your transaction at whatever the rate is prevailing on that particular day. So why do you sell your foreign exchange as you sell pure water? Why do you sell it as you sell akara when you have very limited means of attracting the reserves? So for me, what is needed is a complete change in the way we are managing our economy. I'm not just talking about the policies, no, but I'm also talking about the environment, wherein we must, in word and deed, demonstrate that you can do business easily in this country. The laws that inhibit the establishment and management of companies, for instance, must be modified so that, as in the United States, how do you incorporate a company? How do you operate that company? We have many, many ways, and I'm happy that we do have a joint tax board. In my state, Kaduna State, for instance, I don't know how many authorities are collecting taxes, because from my experience, at the local government, the officials come to me and say, you must pay tax. Representatives of the state come to me, you must pay tax. And at the same time, I know that the Federal Inland Revenue collects tax. So those are three layers. Is the Joint Tax Board working, and is it effective? So those steps that the president has taken, in my view, are very, very commendable. What remains now is to clean the slate so that the ordinary person will be able to find a means of livelihood that protects their dignity and that protects their humanity.
Okay, thank you. And we are now being joined by Ambassador Daudat Aladi. He's a former Nigerian High Commissioner to Pakistan. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much for having me once again.
It's a pleasure to have you join us. Barkada Sallah.
Barkada Sallah, thank you very much.
I'm sure you must have listened to our conversation before you came in here. We're trying to look at the focus and the goals of the summit in Paris, where President Tinubu was there and emphatically said that Nigeria is on a new trajectory to growth and development. Let's have your take.
As you know, there is a paradigm shift in the world. If you have been following the global financial dynamics, you realize that we now have what's called the BRICS countries. It is a big challenge to the dollar, to the United States dollar. The BRICS countries comprises Brazil, India, Russia, China, with a GDP of about almost 40, with a GDP of about 26 trillion US dollars. Population, they have about almost 41% of the population. And if they can be able to come out with a single currency, just like we have in the European Union, I think they will pose a great challenge to the dollar. As you know, 80% of world trade is conducted in dollar. And when you narrow it down to the African countries, it's mind-boggling that today I cannot carry my naira, go to Ghana and buy things with my naira. Neither can a Ghanaian or a Sierra Leonean or any of the African countries come to Nigeria to use their own local currency. So these issues that really impinge on the development of African countries, and therefore the new Global Financial Pact Summit, which was organized ostensibly by Macron, I think is a move in the right direction, because it will provide another platform that will also give the African countries leverage to compete at the international level. Let me say this, that the outing of President Tinubu for the first time, I think is highly commendable, looking at the various challenges that Africa has, especially Nigeria. A situation where you have over 600 million people that do not have access to electricity. If you narrow it down to Nigeria, don't we have the potentials? We do have the potentials. If today we can have an alternative financial pact that can give attention to the issue of infrastructure development in Nigeria, I think it will reposition Nigeria. Look at, for the past 8 years, it's mind-boggling that issues, when you come to power, the Mambila Hydro power plant, for example, a lot has been said, and I believe possibly a lot has been spent. There has been bilateral talks with Russia, with Qatar, with other countries to embark on this project that can give Nigeria about 25,000 megawatts of electricity. That project is yet still on the drawing board. If you look at one of the mega important industry that could have been the backbone for industrialization in this country is the Ajakuta steel. In Sochi, Nigeria was in Sochi, Russia, there was an agreement. We were looking forward to the repositioning of Ajakuta steel. You see, there's no country that can develop without without a steel industry. And after 8 years, that industry is still on the drawing board. Another mega important, critical asset that could have turned the fortunes of Nigeria is the refineries. It is mind-boggling that after all has been said, all the money that has been pumped, yet none of the refineries today is working. If we can have these refineries, the removal of this subsidy would have been a child's play, because the refineries have the capacity to produce about 450,000 barrels of crude oil per day. If you add it with what Dangote has done, then we will be exporting petroleum out of this country. And I do hope that this new government will take up this challenge. And going forward, I think the outing and the sideline meetings that the president has had with countries like the United States, Sweden, and other developed countries, it's my hope that the focus would be to strategize and to make sure that some of these critical assets that will be catalysts for our development will be put on the table, or have been put on the table for discussions. You see, when you talk about even the issue of security, poverty, there is a nexus between poverty, security, and development.
Okay, Ambassador Danladi, thank you very much. I want to pause here and take a bearing from some of the issues that you have raised, some of which we also had the opportunity of discussing following the many foreign engagements of Muhammadu Buhari, president as he then was. And I recall we had you as a guest, and happily we also had Ambassador Bulus Lolo also as a guest. Sochi, organized by Russia, and the president was also at a summit or conference or gathering in Saudi Arabia, where there was some talk about Aramco coming to partake in the upgrade and rehabilitation of our refineries. The one for Sochi, one of the things that came out at that time was that, oh, now we're going to make a headway with Ajaokuta. But as you're saying, 8 years later, where are we? There was also a meeting between India and Africa, a meeting between Japan and Africa, and so on and so forth. So we were participating in all of this, gentlemen, so that it's early days for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. What lessons can we learn from such high-profile engagements that didn't seem to gain traction in terms of outcomes back home? Ambassador Lulu.
Well, thank you, Kingsley, and always it is a pleasure to see Ambassador Dunlady and to listen to him. He brings quite a lot to the table each time you engage him. So, Ambassador, good to see you again.
Thank you.
I'll go back to a point that I made, that Nigeria does not need to go a borrowing. Nigeria does not need to go a begging anywhere if we will do things for our own sake. But that's where it ends, because we believe as a country, and I'm not talking now as people individually, but at the level of our elites, at the level of our political leadership, that somehow we can do what we know is wrong and expect a result that is beneficial to us. Therefore, fritter away your resources, steal as there is no tomorrow, waste as the resources are infinite, and then still have a stupendous reserve. He brought out 3 areas. Number 1, he brought out the Mambila project. We forget how long this project has been going on. He mentioned Ajaokuta. We also forget how long we've been at Ajaokuta. Shagari is long dead. The Second Republic is long gone. Okay? And the refineries. The Kaduna refinery was built by a Japanese company, Chiyoda. Yet, when it comes to turnaround maintenance, we have brought all manner of people into the turnaround of the refineries. I'll add to these 3, our agriculture. Whenever I drive, and especially into Niger State, I do say I smell money as I drive, because our soil is money. And why is it money? The potential in agriculture is limitless in this country. Where are we on agriculture today? Where are we with our food production? How much are we spending to import the very things that we produce and can produce in commercial quantities in Nigeria? And by so doing, importing what you produce, and then I call this we export employment, and then import unemployment. Why? The manufactured goods that are brought are not produced here, and because they are not produced here, the producers are the beneficiaries. In a simple way, Kingsley and Jummai, my advocacy is, if you govern yourself well, it is for your own good. So let us govern Nigeria for the sake of Nigerians, in a manner, when you talk about inclusivity, when you talk about equity, when you talk about fairness, and when you talk about justice, you don't need somebody to hold a stick and say these things are good for you. Rather, they are for your own benefit. But we need a leadership that is visionary. We need a leadership that is courageous. And we need a leadership that will invest on those things that will take Nigeria to a higher level. That way then, is there any field of endeavor in the world today that we do not have Nigerian expertise? Not a single one. Meaning, we have the know-how, we have the capacity,
we have the manpower.
And the manpower. But what is missing is the will to do what is right. And unless we summon that will, will be groping in the dark. And that's why India will call Africa, not Nigeria, Kenya, or South Africa. Turkey will call the whole of Africa. 55 African leaders will troop to go and shake hands with their own counterpart. I have advocated, and I use this forum again to say, we must put an end to single country partnership with the continent of Africa. Let us stand as equals, country to country, when we want to engage. And by so doing then, the point I made about voice, representation, and decision making, the world will not give it to you on a platter of gold. You have to wrest it. And that is the foundation that I think has been laid in Paris. I heard the president of Kenya, who echoed these same sentiments, and said, no, we're not asking you to be fair to us. We want to contribute to the debate so that as there are no limits, let's use COVID-19 and the crisis brought about by terrorism. Not a single Western country has gone to the IMF or the World Bank to seek their approval to hike what they spend. They simply decide internally. But no African country will dare do that. Why? They will come on you heavily. And this is what that voice and representation will seek to do for us.
Indeed, I listened to the Kenyan president, and yesterday while I was going through the research to be able to understand what the summit was all about, somebody asked me and said, why won't African leaders organize a summit by Africans for Africans to listen to themselves and come to a conclusion collectively on how to provide a solution to Nigeria's problem, Africa's problem, Kenyan problem, Egyptian problem, how to provide solutions to it, and how can these leaders be able to tell the international community that we need to contribute our quota to whatever is happening around the world, and not just sit back and wait for their loans, how to, generate our money. We're being told to do everything. How can that change?
Under the auspices of the African Union, I think we have a lot of opportunities there to really look and focus on African problems and challenges. But the whole thing boils down to capital, the financial muscle, to do some of the things that we want to do in order to change Africa. And I'm glad that during the summit, African heads of government have made it very clearly to the summit that promises should not stop at promises. They should walk the talking. In the past, when it comes to the issue of climate challenges, let me just narrow it down to Nigeria. In just 2022, Nigeria lost close to about $19 billion to flooding across the country. And that's quite a huge amount of money, looking at our capacity. And again, they have made it very clear that there must be reform in the multilateral institutions. Africa houses 30% of all non-mineral deposits. Africa is a new horizon. But it's quite unfortunate that Africa does not sit on the table of the multinational financial institutions. There must be a reform. There would be an inclusive reform whereby African countries can be at the table, and African countries can also raise their voices and bring to the fore the various challenges that's confronting African countries. When you look at doing concessionary rights, these things are narrowed down to countries in the northern hemisphere, not the sub-Saharan African countries. If you look at the interest rate, why do we have different interest rates? African countries' interest rates at times 8 times what is obtainable in the northern hemisphere countries. Now, these are issues that I believe in the 21st century, and with this summit, I'm glad that most African heads of government are really raising their voices that yes, we need a new just social order, economic social order, that can have empathy for African countries, that can target and harness the potential of African countries. And what you have said, why can't African countries have their own forum? Yes, I think African countries have various forums. The Free African Continental Trade Area.
What I mean is have our own summit. Let them come to Africa. Let me go out to them. Come to Africa and listen to Africans talk.
I agree with you. If you are able to ginger up under the Free African Continental Trade Area, and then you are able to come out with about, let's say, about $26 trillion by the year 2025 or 2026, yes, they will listen to you. It is your financial muscle and capacity that will attract other countries to come. You see, it is because we are performing below the belt, and we have so many challenges, and we depend, some of African countries depend solely on aids from the northern hemisphere, and that's why you find that we're all rushing there. If you organize a conference to attract, it's a function of your capacity. If you have the capacity, yes, other countries will come, they will participate, and they will contribute. So I think we need to look inwards, and we need to ginger up. African countries must rise to the occasion. We must be able to put our house in order. And if we do that, then of course, we'll be able to hold world summits, and the world will listen.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Danladi. But still on this, we appreciate, gentlemen, the analysis and the insights you are providing. But considering the larger objective, which is to engender a new global financial order, financial system, how much of strategic recourse are we having, say, as a country, and then ultimately as a continent? To say, our policy think tanks being engaged with this, so that we would know what it would be like. There will be scenario plotting and planning. Now, this is, Ambassador Donald, I picked this up, but I didn't want to write on it because you said the summit, maybe it was a manner of speaking, ostensibly organized by Macron. That's the French president. But if there is a deeper sense to that, you probably will have the opportunity of explaining. But this summit is coming, or has come, at a time of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Yeah. And the many dynamics that this has thrown up. We have the Western Europe and the United States and the financial system that they control up against Russia. And Russia is one of the BRICS states. And of course, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are also on the other side saying, look, we need to wriggle out a new financial system away from the dollar standard, probably back to the gold standard, or a competitive standard, systems of payments and financing around the world. In my opinion, we're asking for a tectonic shift in the world's global system. How much, Ambassador Lolo, let me tap into your experience. How much of strategic thinking and plotting is going around so that when it bubbles up to the surface in terms of policy options, then the executive knows how to proceed?
Well, again, Kingsley, I'm happy you are striking the right chords. And again, you are talking about strategic thinking. That's the question we should ask. Are we being strategic in our approach, on one hand? The other one, of course, what are we doing in-house to change our own narrative? Not having to use words to explain, rather to demonstrate with our action that there has been a tectonic, which you use, change in Nigeria. And not just change, because if there is that tectonic change in Nigeria, there will be a corresponding change on the continent. Nigeria is a country that Africa and the world cannot ignore. for good or bad. However, are we in Nigeria aware that we cannot ignore ourselves? Are we? So it brings me down to what I have started out with. And I say governance for its own sake, for us. If you grow the Nigerian economy, increase the manufacturing base in the country, take it or leave it, you will have goods to exchange. People will come to buy from Nigeria, and that will bring us what? Income. It will change the fortune of people in the country. But when you are so dependent on imports to the neglect of what you already have, let's take the value chain in agriculture. How much of it are we taking advantage of? Or is there no value chain to our agriculture? Now, you're into poultry, for instance. How much of that value chain are you benefiting? Now, we have a system where we are very, very wasteful. And somehow we also engage in this replacement syndrome. A bulb is dead. You've not checked to see what the components are to that bulb. You simply go to put a new one. Whereas it may well be that you could have fixed a little bit to give a longer life to it. And so the way we are managing our resources in the country leaves much to be desired, in my opinion. And number two, what we take to the outside world is not so much what is the best for us. Sometimes we go for showmanship. We must move away from this belief and conviction that because you are big in size, you are well endowed, necessarily you will earn respect. No. Respect is something that your own conduct and behavior will bring to you. And it will be in a manner that you must at all times say and do what is logical. I'm talking here about what? Consistency. I'm also referring to coherence. I'm advocating discipline at all levels. That, you see, our penchant really to ignore our laws somehow is one of our undermining weaknesses. Because not being law abiding, being inconsistent in our policy implementation and formulation, like now a new regime has come. Is it everything about the preceding regime that will have to be changed other than the personality? Equally, that you have a new party other than the governing party in opposition. Is it that those parties don't have anything to contribute? When I talk about inclusivity, it has to be inclusivity in ideas and policies. Not just because you are a political party, you want to remain in power. Make yourself relevant. Then people will support you. But when you disconnect after winning an election and believe that now the stage belongs to you, you do whatever you like and force your way tomorrow, you'll have a lot to pay in the future. So my take on this, Kingsley, is simple. We must govern and manage our resources to achieve effectiveness, efficiency, and optimal impact for the greater number of our people.
Indeed, Ambassador Lolo, you voiced some pertinent questions, and you're itching to respond to it. Let's hear from you.
Well, I just wanted to add that you say the way a country is perceived by the international community is a function of its domestic policy.
That's it.
If your domestic policy, you get it right, I'm talking about the issue of corruption, you are able to minimize to a various level the issue of corruption. You are able to ensure that there is adequate security in the country. The ease of doing business.
Yeah.
How long does it take for somebody to clear his goods at the ports? All right. Taxation. You are able to actually come up with a single taxation, not just multiple taxations. You are able to project a country where, to a certain level, there is integrity in doing business, and there are not too much administrative bottlenecks in the bureaucracy. Then, of course, we are sending a good narrative to the outside countries. Again, the role of our Foreign Affairs Ministry, and with due respect to my boss here, Mr. Bulusolo, our embassies should not just be reduced to mere rendering consular services. They are supposed to be marketing officers that would promote the good aspect of Nigeria. They are supposed to attract foreign direct investment, because outside this country, if you go visit other countries, the narratives is not attractive at all. Yeah. And therefore, we must be able this time around to say, look, we will set targets to all our missions, and these targets in order to attract foreign direct investment. I have seen that the president, one of his objectives in this outing, speaking with the US, Sweden on the sideline, was to see how we can attract foreign direct investment into the country to come and tap the abundant human resources that we have. So, the way a country is perceived, it is truly the function of its domestic policy. If you get it right, then it is very easy to market and to sell Nigeria and to attract the direct investment into the country.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Danladi, as well as Ambassador Bulus Lolo. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation. You're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on NTA's network service. Let me return to Ambassador Dauda Danladi. Earlier, we were talking about some of the bilateral and, shall we say, also multilateral summits that our president participated in during the past 8 years. That's before the advent of the new administration. Sochi, Russia, promised to say, all right, we will help you with Ajaokuta. Not much appears to have come out of that. Aramco, Saudi Arabia, we were told that Aramco was going to come, and figures were bandied as to the profitability of Aramco, how that might be transplanted. I recall we also had an interaction with the Nigerian ambassador to Saudi Arabia, India, and Africa, Japan and Africa, and so on and so forth. The former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Oyama, was our guest on Good Morning Nigeria at the end of one of such multilateral engagements, and it seemed to have been a sore point, if you may, or sorry, a lacuna. I think the lacuna is better. That after all of these engagements, pledges, obligations, commitments, there seemed to be no reduction into actionable points. So that you carry them forward. Because if anyone were to do a critical review of what went on from 2015 to 2023, May 29th, there was a lot of exertions, movement, and so on and so forth. But let's narrow it down, because you talked about Mambila, conventional Ajaokuta, you talked about agricultural value chain and our refineries. So what do we need to do as a country administratively to be sure that these commitments, if they are in the villa, then that's a challenge, because they must be part of the institutional circulation, the appropriate MDAs, and so on and so forth, where they can always come back. Ambassador Dola the first, and then we'll turn to Ambassador Bulus.
Well, I think with due respect, perhaps I will make reference to a particular bilateral engagement which is pretended between Nigeria and Pakistan in particular, and I'm glad my boss Ambassador Lolo was the permanent secretary then. You see, we signed 4 bilateral agreements with Pakistan, and one of them was the defense. And the defense sector, we were able to pursue, and I could still remember the contribution of Ambassador Lolo for us to see that we implement this 4 bilateral agreement that we signed. And today, I'm happy to see that the Nigerian Air Force has received 12 Super Mushak trainer aircrafts that is assisting them in the fight against insurgency. I still remember Ambassador Lolo holding me on the neck when I came and gave him briefing and took me to the office of the National Security Advisor. And we were able to make sure that the other part of the agreement was also implemented. We received about 21 cargo C-130 of ammunition and ammo for the Nigerian Armed Forces, and that has contributed in the fight against insurgency. So the issue is the commitment. I think our Foreign Affairs Ministry, there should be reform. A reform that will translate the officers to be committed to follow up on agreements that have been signed. You see, it is one thing to go and sign an agreement and then put it on the shelf without circulating this agreement to relevant agencies that are supposed to participate. There should be a coordination unit under the presidency and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. How far has this agreement, the implementation, how far has it gone? Where is the evaluation? Where are the bottlenecks? If there are bottlenecks, let's attack and address this bottleneck so that these agreements will see the light of the day. But unfortunately, these agreements are just being piled in the offices, especially Foreign Affairs and the SGF's office, without any organ or any responsible department that monitors to ensure that these agreements are implemented. So this is one aspect. The other aspect also, as I have said, it has to do with our disposition as a country. How serious are we? Yeah. And how committed are we? If we go out, is it a jamboree? Just to go out, get escort, and then of course walk the what do you call it, the shopping mall and buy some things and then come back? Or are we there really to ensure that yes, this agreement that have been signed in that country, the ambassador representing us in that country has a duty to make sure that these agreements are translated not only to the Foreign Affairs Ministry, but equally to the relevant agencies that have participated. And we must have a constant review panel within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in collaboration with the presidency. Wait a minute, what is going on with this agreement that we have signed? For example, honestly speaking, it's mind-boggling that in Sochi, funds have been provided. Qatar has came out, provided funds for us to reposition our refineries, including the Aramco's, and then you find that nobody's telling you anything and you don't know what is going on. When we were in Sochi, we are looking at about $60 billion that was put on the table in Sochi, and then today nobody's telling us exactly what is happening, what is going on with the Ajakuta steel. How can you develop? How can you industrialize without a steel industry? What is wrong? Something is wrong somewhere. And we must get that thing that is wrong somewhere, must get it right. And I'm glad that we have now a very proactive President Ahmed Bola Tinubu. He has done it in Lagos. I do hope he will translate it into the big picture and make sure that, for example, this outing, one of the takeaway in this new global financial pact is the fact that a promise has been made of $100 billion every year for the next 5 years to address climate change. I would like to see how Nigerian Foreign Affairs Ministry will cash in, will leverage to make sure that we have access to these funds for the next 5 years to address the perennial flooding that has devastated our economy for the past 5 years. Again, there is another takeaway in this particular summit. That's the debt relief. Nigeria today, Ahmed Bola Tinubu inherited 77 trillion naira debt. Now, a country that has 77 trillion naira debt, you begin to wonder what will be the income of this country to address this debt and to have enough to provide for capital project. So I strongly believe that Ahmed Tinubu will first of all assess this 77, what domestic and international debt, 77 trillion, what has been done with this money. What are the tangibles that have been done with this money? What are the projects that can repay itself? What are the intangibles, the tangentials, and what can we put in place to make sure that they become profitable, viable, so that we can have the capacity to begin to repay this debt. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for Bola Ahmed Tinubu's vision and dream to translate Nigeria without addressing 77 trillion naira debt.
Okay, Ambassador Lolo, we keep dancing around the elephant in the room, which is corruption.
Yeah. Well, each time I've talked about governance, it has been all-encompassing, because when you govern and govern well, you don't need anybody to tell you that there is no room for corruption. You don't need anyone to tell you that there is no room for mediocrity, or anyone to tell you that, look, ethnicity and religion do not in and of themselves lend to development. It's competence and excellence. Now, I like it when he said our outing should not be for jamboree or shopping spree. On a lighter mood, I will share an experience very briefly. There was an African diplomat in New York who had a resolution on behalf of her country that was to come for a vote. And the time of the meeting was 3 o'clock. Everyone was gathered except the lady whose country was to take the vote. And an hour into the meeting, everybody was seated. Then she walked in with a shopping bag into the room. That is to say, our outing sometimes is for frivolous reasons, absent the objective, that is the core objective and purpose of a gathering. And you said, what is wrong with us? I'll bring 4 key elements that are lacking. He has talked about them in a way, but I just want to highlight them the more. The issue of coordination, issue of monitoring, issue of evaluation, and liaison. If you take our public sector, the civil service in this country, there is that gap. You go into a ministry, with the reforms of 1988, there were 8 departments that you would find in any given ministry. The departments do not talk to themselves. So in 2015, when I had the fortune to be permanent secretary, mindful of the fact that coordination was a challenge, one of the first things I did was to set up a coordination and liaison unit in the office of the permanent secretary that reported directly to me. And the directive I gave was, every Friday afternoon at the close of work, every unit in the ministry, every section, every department will send in copies of mails that they had sent out. Meaning, there was a single file that showed me the picture of activities in the ministry by Friday, so that I would read the copies, and by Monday I will send out the same folder for information. And at the end of it, I asked that a table be made of actions that are outstanding, results that have come in, and follow-up that was necessary. You have a glance. I left in 2016, and the coordination and liaison unit left with me. And it's not peculiar to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is system-wide, service-wide in the country today that we do not have effective coordination. We need to monitor. Like you said, we've come back from Paris. What was the takeaway from Paris? What was the commitment that was made in Paris? Who is to do what? Necessarily, if it is within the villa, the office of the Chief of Staff and the Secretary to Government should tease out those actions and then send word for implementation and follow-up. It is not being done. And again, he said something about evaluation. Between now and the next outing, or if in Paris it was agreed that in 90 days, structures should be set up, policies should be adopted, has the necessary instruction been given for this to be done? No. Then, of course, the issue of liaison. I'm happy that the president has a special advisor now on policy coordination. Will this cascade to the ministries, departments, and agencies? Will it also cascade to the states? Unless we do so, there will always be the implementation gap. And for me, thinking outside the box, there are those things that we can do very cheaply by making sure, and I'm talking here at the level of the heads, the political and administrative heads of each structure, there should be a meeting of minds between the ministers and permanent secretaries and the directors. Either quarterly, you review the activities of your ministry. What is your own scorecard? How much have you done? What is missing? And reward and sanction should also be brought in. I talked about what? We are not a law-abiding people. And because we aren't, you get away with anything. And that is also a form of corruption. So for us to do things differently, we must, for the sake of now and tomorrow, decide that, you know what, we are setting achievable targets for ourselves. In the next 6 months, we want to see improvement in power generation. In the next 6 months, we want to see measurable improvement in security. And on and on. This is the way to go.
I'm just wondering, Ambassador Bulus Lulu, I know there's a forum of permanent secretaries where these conversations take place. It is probably less so at the state level, unless one or two states are kidding. But there's been so much talk about public sector or public service reforms. And sometimes you wonder what some of the ingredients that constitute these reforms. Because listening to what you are saying now, this is a costless administrative approach. So it's simply saying, look, how do we coordinate? How do we have the liaison? How do we monitor? How do we evaluate? Just have a pool so that if there are commitments, because part of what kept emerging over the years was that, look, you go for these international summits, you go for these international conferences, there are timelines for obligations. And then suddenly we wake up when it is the deadline and we realize that we are nowhere. And then so we go back to such conferences or meetings or international gatherings to be pleading for extension of time and all that. So this is in-house. That, or let's put it this way, in country, for us to revitalize ourselves. Is this achievable?
Yes, it is. And I'm happy you talked about the Council of Retired Federal Permanent Secretaries, COFEPs. It's a body that is made up of what? Former heads of service and retired federal permanent secretaries who are still strong, who are still knowledgeable. And Kingsley, you had talked much earlier about strategic thinking and engagement with our think tanks. Not because I retired as a permanent secretary that I would say what I'm about to say. But in truth, when it comes to the public sector in this country, there is no collective organization that is better than the Council of retired federal permanent secretaries to advise government on the public service. Why? Because each member at one time or the other has superintended over the same thing that is taking place today. And so when you talk of in-house capacity, we have it. But it is about the will to act. Is the will there? What is the environment today that exists? And so if you are the chief executive, you must find a way. And we need a template, a reporting template. Preparations are on right now, okay, to go to UNGA in September, where all the ministries will be brought together. But after UNGA, they never sit again to review. And that's why the tens and tens of resolutions that will be adopted will end up in a corner.
Gathering dust.
Forgotten. If it were just to gather dust, that would be a separate thing. You go to buy roasted corn and they are going to use one of the resolutions, the paper it has been printed on, to wrap your corn, meaning it has been thrown into the dustbin. And that's all there is to it. What about the cost of our participation? What about our commitment? And so we must be more innovative in the things we are doing in-house today in the country. We must also hold people accountable. Accountability. There is need for transparency. Lift that cloak that is hindering people from seeing what you are doing. After all, government acts on behalf of the people.
Yes.
And government, therefore, must be accountable to the people.
In 30 seconds, your final words.
In 30 seconds, my final words would be that I pray for this new government to have the vision, to have the focus, so that they can reposition Nigeria. There is a need for us to be aggressive in following up all issues. The takeaway from the Paris summit, there are 5 good takeaways from this Paris summit, and it is my hope that a strategy will be adopted to ensure that Nigeria benefits and actually have a niche in this 5 takeaways. We are looking forward to a repositioned Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well as our embassies, so that they can be marketing officers for the country to attract the necessary foreign direct investment, vis-a-vis the need to also put our house in order.
Okay, Ambassador Dauda Ladi, former Nigerian High Commissioner to Pakistan. As usual, thank you so much for your contribution to the conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ambassador Bulus Lolo, former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much, Juma. Thank you.
Don't worry, next time we won't wake you up in the morning.
it will be inevitable.
Thank you so much for having, contributing to the topic here and giving an insight into how Nigeria can go forward in the future.
Thank you.